been extremely traumatized by your life. You may not see it, but I do.
I've got trauma like someone from war.
Hi, it's Lauren. Today's lyric analysis is the song The More I Love. It is the 13th song overall and the 3rd song in the pink section. This song is a hard one for me just because it's primarily about feelings of being trapped and powerless, but even worse than that, like the harder you try to get out of the cycle, the more you perpetuate it. So it starts with the chorus, the more I love, the more they judge. So the more I love, the more I am myself, the more people judge my true self. I kind of grew up with this feeling of like who I am and what I want didn't matter because when you're a kid, it's all full of like things you have to do. You have to go to school, you have to eat food at certain times, certain bedtimes, and that was really hard for me. So I just assumed like, oh, when I'm older, my needs will matter and what I want matters and who I am will matter. And then it was just like, I got a little older and then it's like a little more, a little more, a little more. But no matter how old I got, that feeling never went away. And I'm 30 now. And at what point am I old enough to have my own values and make my life what I want it to be? So then it goes, the more I give, the more they take. So this is about trying to be a nice person and giving people your time, basically not having boundaries. And everyone tells you to be nice. Boundaries are a new thing probably in the past, like decade. But be nice, put others' needs before yours. But the more I did that, the less my needs were met, when my whole reason for doing that is so people would like me and I would get more of my needs met. So that sucks. The harder I try, the less difference it makes. This is about my illness and my symptoms. Now, everyone talks about, oh, you gotta push past discomfort to grow and all this stuff. But if you have an illness and symptoms and you keep pushing, you won't get better. Like, let's just use the example of like a broken leg, because it's just an easier example than mental illness and other things. You do have to, like, in some ways, make your leg uncomfortable by exercising and using it. Your muscles may burn, etc. And that's good. But you have to push it and then rest and then push it. You can't push it all the time. And then to make matters worse, what if that leg was broken? If that leg was broken, it doesn't get stronger. By you walking on it, it gets weaker. And that's where I was at with my symptoms and my illness. I was really invalidated that it wasn't real and all this stuff for a lot of reasons. So I kept pushing through, thinking it's just my personality. And the more I pushed through, the worse my symptoms got. And the worse my symptoms got, the more I was blamed for not being strong enough to overcome them. So which goes into the next one. The more I suffer, the more I am shamed. And then the more suffering people see, the more I'm then shamed for not being able to get out of the suffering when their advice of pushing through is what is causing it to begin with. So it's just cycle upon cycle upon cycle that's making things as bad as possible for me. It's not just one negative cycle. They're all working together and it's horrific. Because I had this guilt. How come I'm not strong enough to recover? How come I'm not strong enough to manage my emotions? How come other people can and I can't? What's wrong with me? And then it goes back to the more I love, the more they judge. And I don't always mean love in a positive context of self-love or positive love. I mean love like trying to get love. Like the more I try to get love from other people, by either changing who I am or doing what they say or being a hard worker, pushing through, the less I get. The world tells you that the harder you work, the more you put others' needs before yours, the better your life will be. And it's actually the opposite. So I feel like everything my world and life was built on was a lie to keep cycles of exploitation and suffering going. And then this line, It goes, I got trauma like someone from war. This is going to be a controversial line because, comparing pain. And let me just explain why I put this line in. The last thing I want to do is compare different kinds of trauma, who's worse, who's better, and on this judgmental thing of who deserves more compassion. Like, no, that's not the reason why I do it. The reason I put that line in is I was in a psych ward and there was this guy in here and he had trauma, but definitely the more kind of physical, obvious from an outside perspective type of trauma. And we had quite an intense relationship in there. Definitely, I would definitely say my psych ward boyfriend. We basically lived together. He he talked about wanting to have my children, and it was a whole thing. But he's like, you have a similar trauma level to mine. Maybe you don't see it, but the exact quote was, you have been extremely traumatized by your life. You may not see it, but I do. And so when I say this line, I'm not trying to say that my suffering is worse than anyone's. All I'm saying is you can have a high category of trauma when it may not look like that from the outside to someone else. So I'm trying to be inclusive with this line rather than divisive. But in life, we have to make sense of the world, we have to make some kind of judgments. Someone's shot in war and lost their best friend, and then they're out of oat milk. Everyone's trauma is the same, but you gotta have some rational judgment there. And so my hope with this line is to try to validate and bring us together rather than this competition of whose suffering is worse. Next part is, 'cause my truth's been ignored. My truth's been ignored, well, who I am. And then the truth of these cycles of suffering. I've been given advice that's supposed to help me get better and help me get stronger and tough it out. But that advice has only made things worse for me in terms of my mental health and physical health and spiritual health and social health, everything. And instead of criticizing the advice, I was like, I guess I must be so weak that the harder I try, the worse I get. So it's like my effort is in the negative numbers. That's how worthless I am. That's how weak I am. That's how pathetic I am. When in reality, I should have been blaming the advice, looking at the facts and being like, oh, this doesn't work. And then it goes, every time I try, they gaslight and criticize. Invalidating my experiences and emotions and just telling me things are normal when they're not. And then criticizing when I can't recover or fix all my problems, assuming it's because of my character and it's my fault and I'm not working hard enough. So then it goes, the more I love, the more they judge. And another way to say this, which is probably similar, is the more I give the love I should have for myself away and put others' needs before mine, they don't do the same. They take it and keep taking it until I have nothing left with no regards for how I feel. They say the more you put out, the more you give back. I'm starting to think that's not true. I'm starting to think of more, what you are, you attract. So pain and suffering begets more pain and suffering, and love and joy begets more love and joy. I thought it was the opposite. I thought I could earn my love and joy through pain and suffering, but it just brought more pain and suffering. So then it goes, the harder I try, the more I'm blamed. And it's this idea of, why am I so weak? My maximum effort that I can put in is nowhere near enough. In fact, it's not even at zero. I'm starting in the negative numbers, just how weak I am compared to everyone else. How come I can't handle these normal things that everyone else can? Then the louder I scream, the more I am shamed. So I feel like I was basically told to suppress all my emotions When you suppress your emotions, they build up and explode. So I have an outburst, and then I'm shamed for not controlling myself enough, but that's what caused the problem to begin with. I've been stuck in these cycles my whole life, thinking it's my fault. Yeah, physical suffering with the symptoms, which I make worse by pushing through. There's emotional suffering with never getting my needs met. So spiritually, I can't handle anything. Like, I'm such a weak person. Socially, the more, every possible way. It's, I was having trouble with this song, that's probably why. Yeah. The louder I scream, the more I am shamed. The more desperate I am for help, the more pain and shame it brings from everyone. Probably. Just about. And then the more I trust, the more I'm betrayed. A couple examples. In the song My Power Back, we've talked about this whole song of, I've never let myself be comfortable because I'm weak and pathetic. And, in a moment of his insecurity, he used that, well, you're just not willing to be uncomfortable. As I'm having like these screaming episodes where it's like my body's almost going into shock. I'm like never comfortable, and he's telling me that I'm too comfortable. I mean, it destroyed me basically. The one person I thought I trusted that saw something good in me told me that all the horrible things everyone has ever said about me were true. And before that, there was a therapy program. They told me to my face that they judged me based on the way that I dressed. It was the Mission Hospital, Laguna Beach, partial hospitalization and intensive outpatient program. They literally told me to my face that they judged me based on the way that I dressed and gave me a personality disorder because of that. And especially this one therapist, I mean, they'd walk in with this swagger like, I know everything, when they've met you for only a few minutes. There were a lot of horrible things that happened, but they basically confirmed, that it is just me. It is just my personality. I'm just not willing to work hard. I just want to make excuses. I mean, and it wasn't just me. Like, I remember this one guy, he was like some kind of addiction, and he was talking humbly, I might add, about like, I've started doing this and that. And the therapist is just like this guy with this swagger. I don't know who he is, but I used to respect him. He tells it like it is, but he's actually like really a narcissistic asshole. Whoever you are, if you hear this, you get what's coming for you. Am I still bitter? He's like, with a face like this, like, don't expect to be rewarded for things you should already be doing. That's so cruel. He wasn't even bragging. He wasn't making excuses. All he was doing was calmly telling the group some of the positive changes he made, and that was his reaction. That's so unfair. Like, if someone's depressed and they haven't showered or brushed their hair for a month and they do it, that's a huge accomplishment. What, you don't get to celebrate it? Celebrate anything that you should be doing? That's so unfair because everyone comes from a different place. And it's so cruel because everyone has different challenges and roadblocks. And it's so ambiguous because there's no, concrete thing for what you should be doing or what's normal, so you'll never get any satisfaction. I think he liked people not getting satisfaction because otherwise he wouldn't have said it, because it makes no sense. There are narcissists everywhere. You have to be able to see them. And that was one. You could tell by the way he walked, by what he said. Lovely. And then at home, I have felt that at home, the things I do aren't acknowledged. In a few months, I went from like hospitalizations for 3 years, symptoms so bad I thought they were going to kill me. I would scream for 4 hours, like just at the top of my lungs, let me die. It's the worst pain I've ever felt. I stopped the episodes. I started this YouTube channel. This is my 26th video in like the last few months. Times when I could barely stand up. Times when just picking something up off the floor and putting it in there makes me want to die. And I've done it all on my own, and I haven't heard one positive comment about anything. About that I ever did a good job or any interest in my life, any questions about my videos, any questions about my skating. No acknowledgement that anything has ever happened, or that I ever achieved anything, or that anything I've done has ever mattered. I don't really know why, but it's quite painful because I feel like random people I talk to or people off the street are more impressed and with some aspects of me than my deepest familial relationships. They don't see me, and they never will. These last few years have been so obvious, and my changes have been so obvious. My low points, my improvements have been so obvious that it's impossible not to see, yet they still don't see or acknowledge it. So I guess it must be a choice not to acknowledge it, which is hurtful because I don't know why you wouldn't want to say something positive about your own daughter when they've gone through hell and come out on the other side of it. There was this movie, it was when I was in one of these psych ward holding centers. It was about Elton John, and obviously we all know how famous he was. But his parents told him that he was undisciplined and all these character things because they didn't consider music like something that a good, hardworking person would do, and it almost destroyed him. I mean, he had a whole planet adoring him, and then just the opinion of his parents like almost destroyed him. Like the whole world couldn't fix that ideology. So no one outside me can fix it. I just have to be able to see my own successes because they're not going to be acknowledged by my parents. They never will be, for whatever reason. And if I were to get famous and people adoring me, it wouldn't change how I feel internally. So like no amount of people on the outside can change it. This has to be like an inner journey of like seeing the things I've done. And it has been a miraculous recovery, and I know it and I feel it and I see it. And yet I feel unsure that I've done anything because the reality is never acknowledged. I know people always have their reasons for doing things, and they care, and they do a lot of wonderful things. But some things are very hurtful, and I'm allowed to be hurt. So then it goes I've got trauma like someone from war because my truth's been ignored. Yeah. Trapped in an impossible dynamic of powerlessness that I can never escape if I continue it. It'll just go around and around forever. Now, this is the last part. So the first time it was, every time I tried, they gaslight and criticize. And this time I changed the lyrics to, every time I try, I gaslight myself. I criticize. The external things around me have now become internal. So I gaslight myself. When I'm having severe problems and symptoms, it's not that bad. And then I criticize myself, oh, you're just weak. There's a big difference between it's like, I'm doing this hard thing versus, wow, I can't even do the simplest thing. And then the more I love, the more I judge. And the last part, the more I love, I've learned to judge myself. I have this internal dialogue based on what was around me that isn't necessarily my own. And this is because I didn't feel like I had the right to have my own values and identity and all that stuff. One, because I was just trying to get through the day of all the things I didn't want to do, and it was painful to have that conflict. And second, because I thought that was something you earn when you're older, Like, once I have my own house, my own money, my own job, and everything's paid for, then I can have my own values and my own personality. Problem with that is that you can't get there if you're that unhappy, because you'll break before you're like 18. So another one of those cycles of traps and suffering that you can never get out. It's like, oh, I'll be happy here, but you can't even get here. And even if you did get here, you wouldn't be happy because the internal dialogue would be the same and it would just change to something else and you'd feel the exact same. So, what cycles are you trapped in? Be honest with yourself. Be objective. Don't be self-critical. When I do X, what happens? Exercise is a great example. When you exercise, do you go and you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. I kind of feel better afterwards. Or do you exercise and you're like, wow, I feel really sick. I feel worse. I feel more drained. And not just with exercise, ask yourself that in everything. Because yes, to grow, you will have moments of discomfort, maybe more than moments, but there should be moments of relief in between the discomfort. And if you're taking these actions and they're draining you and making you feel worse, maybe you're trapped in an impossible cycle. So, thanks so much for listening. Talk to you later. Bye.
I've learned to judge myself.